Hello everybody, Anthony is here, and in this video I will talk about how I added some details to this particular building. And this is a set of buildings that will become a city later. I used a lot of reference that I've gathered in my life in Asia, and we can refer to my reference packs on fotoref.com. I've also used a lot of alphas from textures.com, and you can download 15 free alphas from there per day. I spent a lot of time picking the right alphas, going through all of them. Spent like honestly a couple hours, so you can see the whole list of links to those textures, to those particular materials in the description. So here I've already done the building, just using a blob tool, and I've started kind of like just a little blockout. And now I wanted to go and add a lot more details and kind of a bit more sense. So for example, here I'm using the sphere tool to create this stilted support to the building from the bottom up, and activate the shadows, because without the shadows I really cannot read the negative space, and that, I still find viewport in 3D code to be quite amazing, because we have a really good preview of what we're getting. Not as good as Blender, but it's pretty good. So here I'm just using the blob tool to create the walls of the building. And I don't really have a specific idea in mind. I have an idea to build this super slum city, and this could be also like a standalone tower, and maybe potentially could use it in some exploration of a concept of like a fishing village. That's like a bit more cyberpunk fishing village. And cyberpunk, it's the reason I kind of call it cyberpunk, and it's because when I was building this building, I was thinking about using the metal, like some plastic, wood, all kind of different materials. It's currently available, but I'm kind of building upwards and building a bit more massive than you would see in some kind of regular slummy slum in the current world. So I wanted to make it a little bit more in the future by making it quite a bit taller. And just adding little details, and I always think about this will be like will be done like makeshift done like by hand, just welding sporadically, like not a bit randomly, not really considering different distances, and maybe some stuff has been welded for this particular use, but then it became disused, so they built another piece to hold something else. And those little details, those little kind of bumps that you see on the building, they add a bit more history to it, but also make it look like it wasn't planned beforehand. So it was just built as long as the city, at the building was growing. And here I'm using a stencil, just this kind of like bricked wall. So one wall can be done of bricks, another wall will be done of iron, and maybe the front wall will be more like plastic panels or some wooden type mixture. Another stencil. And I'm not really sure what the stencil is about. You can see when I'm projecting, it's kind of catching the stilts. And I was a little bit lazy here. I'm doing everything on one layer, so I'm not even dividing the objects, which continuously kind of bit me back. But I was still pretty stubborn about trying to do everything in just one layer. Playing around with stencils that just come standard with 3D code, the circles, and I changed the scale of them, so now I can create a pattern of some particular surface. So create a housing. That could be a housing to hold some electronic equipment, could be a housing for aircon. Put some antennas around, so maybe a cell phone tower on the roof. And now I'm just painting the cables. I'm using the sphere tool with a curve, and this is where the name of fishing tower came about, because of just doing all these ropes all around, and became to look like some kind of fishing village place. And I'm using the curve tool on plane, so it's kind of fixed in the space. So if you don't use on plane with the sphere, then this starts to kind of jump and snap to everything, like I'm doing right now. I'm not snapping the sphere to any planes. Therefore, when I'm painting, it just snaps to everything. It can be good and bad, so you just pick it depending on the use case. All right, so now I've painted those ropes, but I need to create the supports for them. So I've just done that, and now I'm using another stencil to create another type of material surface, front of that wall. Looks pretty good. And when I see this stencil didn't finish well, I just covered with a blob tool. I covered, like I imagine it would be a wooden panel. And most of the stuff, it's good from, say, medium distance. On a close-up, it doesn't really hold up. But for me, it's most of all, it's a concept design exercise. I just want to be free in exploring slimy type of towers. And at the end of the day, they actually not that bad. If then I wanted to use some kind of kit to recreate it, it wouldn't be hard to do. And now I'm painting some trees. Right now I'm using cow brush and just adding it. Not looking great. I will probably modify it. I think I will modify it later a little bit. So I'm trying to clean up some random bits that are floating around. I'm trying to do different alphas as well. So painting and then removing some of the trees. Again, obviously the trees, they're more like blobs. They're just good enough for the distance. Now it's really cool. It has a bit of has a tree generator, but I just prefer to paint them for the concept purpose to make it quick. You can see I have some stuff that's been hidden, and just unhid a tower that I wanted to modify and make to look better. So you can see I'm pretty much removing most of the tower. And there was this old building that I've created, but it just was a bit too quickly made. It didn't have enough sense to it. So this time I wanted to make something that made a lot more sense. But I'm trying to preserve a bit of that randomness that I've created before. So I'm trying not to, I want to have that old panels that are stuck out. And here I'm doing the blob tool with a big radius. So when I use an on plane from the bottom, I can actually create this cylindrical tower. Now I'm making like a cage to hold this cylinder. Thinking it could be even a water tower, who knows? Could be a diesel tower. Could hold any kind of supply there. And I'm trying to create this little thin shapes which supports, but with the little shapes, I'm offsetting the bigger chunks of geometry. So I'm using a stencil to do, actually I'm not sure what I'm doing here. I think that stencil wasn't really good. And I'm trying some other stencils. And really it's a lot of experimentation here, so sometimes it wouldn't work out, so be like, okay, move on. This one didn't look that great on that part, but I started to experiment and use it on the top, and I really like how it looked at the top. So it has this bit of like brutalist feel, like brutalist architecture feel from like 1970s, and I just left it there. So, and I like that. I like that the cage creates a bit of depth to the whole building. So I like the layered effect. We have an outer shell, then inside there's something inside. You can't really see, but you can see the negative space essentially working and selling the design. I found that if I cleaned up too much, like I would remove some parts that I maybe didn't have too much sense to them, I wouldn't help the design. So now, if I had some kind of blob that sticks out from before, I would always just keep it there. And here I'm using a sphere tool to create some metallic supports. And I've seen a lot of that again, going around Asia. Just stuff being built quickly because they don't have winter. The construction can be extremely cheap, so they will use metallic stilts, anything that holds, you can hold it together. And I've added this kind of communication, like little satellite dishes, little antennas. Maybe there's a sign or who knows what on the top. And I'm trying to paint some cables, and I'm trying to find the right radius, and I'm using the curve on sphere to paint it. It's trying to break the monotony of this grid, introducing smaller shapes, smaller cuts. And I'm making a smaller grids and looking at how they look, if they're any good or not. And I was fairly happy with them. Just kept them in place. Using one of those standard stencils, just stretching the the squares along to make it rectangular. And trying to add a bit more dirt around. Trying to add some trees. With different alphas, just trying to always suffer a little bit. Just trying to pick the best alpha for the trees. And now we use the box height to remove some of those floating parts of the leaves. And I did have the launching pad already, so that's pretty much closing to the end. I built the top part, I built the bottom, and Now we can see how the top looks and the bottom, and I just kind of randomly put them together. Now we have a little module kit. In my bigger tutorial module town design in 3D code, I explain how I use all the tools in detail by chapters. It's all broken down, and I also cover how I texture it. So if you're curious about it, go check it out. The link is in the top and in the description.